All right. So we are alive. Looks like we are. Yeah. Well, hi everybody. Today is Monday. I can't believe it's Monday already, and it's almost halfway through September. So, no, September. Look at me. I can't even think.
December.
December, the end of the year. Wow. So anyway, I'm Miri Cadero, my partner here, Caroline Blossel, and we have a wonderful guest today. We love having guests because guests makes it interesting. We kind of almost under the same umbrella of finance, creating cash flow, creating more income for ourselves. But in the end of the day, it can come from so many ways, right? So anyway, I met Dan Grove through a Growthco community, right? You took Jesse Stanton mentorship. I think you probably did one or two behind me. That's what I'm thinking. I don't think we were in the same one. So we're very happy to have you, Dan, really. So how about you? Tell us a little bit about you. Uh,
I'm Dan. I live in Baltimore, Maryland. That's where I live now. I grew up in Arizona, but I married a Jersey girl. I tried living in Jersey, but I couldn't do it. So we compromised, and Maryland is kind of a compromise between, living in Jersey or I guess going crazy. I'm a physician. I practice medicine. I do pulmonary and critical care medicine, which means I work in intensive care units, and I also do lung diseases. Those two go together. Yeah, I double majored in medical school, I suppose you could say. They so
The heart and the lungs. I
yeah,
mean, did you run across people who do both of those things? Because it
I'm
takes a
not a
lot.
cardiologist. Cardiologists do heart. Intensive care is kind of like we're like the hospital doctors for the sickest patients.
oh,
And
wow.
it usually connects. A lot of people do it with lung diseases because of all the patients who are on ventilators, who are on machines to life support machines to help people breathe. So it ended up being over the decades that the doctors who work in the ICU are also lung doctors. So that's
Wow.
you need a specialty that's combined training. So and then about maybe 3 years ago, is it 3 years ago? 2 or 3 years ago? No, 3 years ago, I started being interested in maybe finding other avenues of income. And I think it was triggered by a lot of things. One is obviously the pandemic.
Mhm.
It was a difficult time to be an intensive care doctor during the pandemic. Um, and so it's like, okay, well, there's a lot of burnout happening. I was like, I need to be prepared in case I want to scale back a little bit. And then also sort of the corporatization of medicine. My practice got taken over by a big corporate health system, which made things a little less kind of personal and more corporate, I mean, and
Mhm.
so not exactly like corporate America was not like you go to medical school, you don't want to be dealing with middle managers and assistant vice presidents of this and that. And so I said, okay, well, I want to be able to have a source of income that if there's something where I just I'm burnt out, or if I don't like what the health system is doing, I can scale back and not have to worry. Also at some point, I have 5 kids, so I want to be able to go travel around and see the grandkids whenever I want. There's a birthday party, there's this, there's that. I want to be able to not have to be stuck in one place and have a source of income that is not geographically tethered.
Yeah.
So I started getting into real estate investing. I had money I had saved up, and I learned about creative finance and all these things. I've been trying to build up from that, learning usually by screwing up along the way, and we have trying to build something up. Yeah,
You're in a good company. We all screw up. Trust me.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I was going to say, I remember Robert Kiyosaki saying the people that are successful right out of the gate, they think it's really easy. They have too much confidence, whereas you kind of you want some difficulties so that I mean, you don't want them, but you're
You don't want to
grateful.
lose money. That's what you're saying. But
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
we're good.
like it's funny. Like I think anybody who got into real estate in 2016, is a genius, just because, hey, all you have to do to become wealthy in real estate is invest in a time when we have record low interest rates and record high appreciation, and you'll be fine. It's not hard. Just find the time in history that is unique and has never happened before and will never happen again, and you'll be great.
Yeah,
yeah.
right. You just have to be the right age too for that too.
Right.
I,
If you find somebody who invested in 2006 right?
Mhm.
And was still going in 2014. That's different than somebody, 2014 and is still going in 2020, So I think we have
Yeah.
a little bit of that. Let's see who started in 2020, 2021, and who's, how much
Yes.
are we hanging on,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It has changed a lot. I mean, just the housing market in general, and interest rates, and the dollar, and presidents, and
Whole
Yeah.
sleep mess, in
all
my
that
opinion.
matters. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was just 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, you got started in real estate, and I was thinking I'd love to know how you, well, in your conversation with your wife, saying I think I want to go invest in real estate.
Yeah.
Because Mary and I kind of focus on women being financially educated and the things
Right.
that they really need to know, um, and and sometimes the wives aren't always on board. And I was thinking, you as a doctor, she probably thought that was only what her future was going to be.
Yeah, so there have been some there have been some issues where I've had to scale back a little bit and be less active because of that. Because I mean, in reality, when I started this, neither of us knew what I was getting into, right?
Mhm.
I didn't know what I was getting into really, and then you get to a point where like you just sort of get going, and then I had to take a step back and say, okay, fine. Like I have this goal, but I have these other responsibilities, and life is about balance. And it's the interesting thing about this for me, and I guess it's probably true for most businesses, is that there is literally something you could be doing every second of every day, right? And
Right.
so I would have this feeling like, um, man, I need to be doing this, I need to be doing that, I need to be making connections and having meetings and posting things and checking things out and looking at properties. I have that feeling. I had that feeling all the time because in reality, at any moment I could be doing any of those things.
Yeah.
And I just sort of said, okay, well, I can be doing any of those things, but should I be? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so if it means like I'm not going to be, a real estate mogul,
Mhm.
that's probably okay. It's better, right? I'd rather, I mean, I'd rather have a lower net worth and a better relationship with my family,
Yes.
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. It's easy to actually
Yes.
And
relate.
and right,
Mhm.
and I'd rather, make have less passive income and not have an ulcer would be nice also, right? And sleep
Yeah,
through
because
the
that,
night, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, right. So I think I don't know. I think that the way that our society is set up, it's all about looking a certain way and having a certain number of social media follows and having a certain amount of money in the bank account and making a certain amount of cash flow. And and I think that that's a hard thing for most people, myself included. I can't live up to those kind of standards because those kind of standards are always comparative, right? You're always comparing yourself to somebody else, and it doesn't matter how much money you make, how much money you have. There's always somebody who's owns more properties, makes more money, has a better car, has a better spouse, has a bigger house, has a better vacation, whatever it is. There's always somebody who has more,
Yes,
right?
you're right. You're absolutely right.
So I think the best thing to do is to just I read a very interesting book by Simon Sinek called The Infinite Game.
Mhm.
Right. So the idea is that if this is like an infinite game, the goal of the game is to stay in the game, right? And it doesn't
Exactly.
matter how many
Mhm.
things are going wrong, right? If I'm still in the game, like I'm still in the game, I'm still growing, developing, trying to make things happen while balancing everything else, then great, then I'm in the game. That's all that matters. There's no
Well,
winning this game, right? This
no,
is
I know.
I don't think business or life or money is a game that you win or lose, right? As much as the business world makes you think that it's about winning or losing, there is no winning and there's no losing. There's just, do you still play,
You're
right?
right.
Right.
And
Right.
it's no destination, it's the journey. And that's another thing that people think, oh, I need to get there. Because when you get there, you say, oh, what's now? Now you
Exactly. Right.
go more. And then, oh, what's now? And I so understand what you're talking about, especially, you know, I think maybe you're younger than Caroline and myself. But however,
You guys are
I
also in your 30s, right?
Yeah.
yes, of course,
Yeah.
we are.
Just like me. I'm in my early 30s.
You just don't want to live life like that. You like I have grandkids now. I want to enjoy them. I want to be when I'm healthy, I have energy. That's what I want to do. Yes, an absolutely great point. Staying in the game, I think that's the goal. It's consistency. That's what we wanted to talk about. how you keep yourself consistent, how you motivate. Um,
Yeah, I just try to keep going, you know. And then when the bank accounts are getting low and there's not a deal coming in and I'm dealing with all kinds of garbage, I'm still in the game. I remember thinking there was a time when it was like, okay, so I have an amazing job, thank God. I make great money and it's fine. And the thing that always make me stressed is like I didn't have any reason to I have no reason but to be anything but grateful for everything I have. I just had the feeling of I didn't want to be stuck, right? In working, like I work very, very hard and it could be draining a lot of times, you know. And so I didn't want to be stuck, so I always wanted to have an option available. I think most people would probably feel that way also. And so I have that option. Is it going to work out or not? I don't know, but as long as I'm in this game, I have hope that that might happen, and that's good enough, right? If it doesn't happen by the time I get there, it'll be okay. I'll find something else, you know.
Well,
absolutely.
and also I have 8 children. Mary has 4 kids, and
Oh,
just
you win.
well, I I was just, and I was part of the reason I got into real estate was realizing that the world is changing in so many different ways that to have just the one stream of income is really a tenuous place to be. And so I just appreciate that you're also looking at, okay, I realize now that things can change. The climate in which I work can change with both the pandemic, but also just how business is run.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think
Right.
we keep,
Especially, yeah, it's a shame. We all wish that healthcare wasn't a business.
No.
All of us that got, because most of the people that got into healthcare, we didn't do it like we weren't business minded people. That's sort of,
no, yeah,
but unfortunately, it's hard not to do it as a business, but there has to be some way to balance it. I don't listen. You can find experts about how to fix the healthcare system. I don't think shooting people is going to fix it, but
yeah, no,
that's just me.
not the direction to
As
go.
much as I may have wanted to shoot people when I'm like getting prior authorization, it was never a serious desire to shoot people. I don't think that's going to solve any problems. But
No.
but nonetheless, like it's a problem. It's got to get fixed. I'm not the one to fix it, so there's nothing I can do about it. Like I think somebody once told me you should never worry about two things. The two things you should never worry about are things that you can control and
Mm-hmm.
things that you can't control. Right. Things you can control, you shouldn't worry about it. You should do something. Things you can't control, you can't do anything about it anyways. Like, what's the point? Right. And worry
And,
about it. So I can't control the US healthcare system. Right. So I'm not going to worry about that now. I'm just going to try to know that it's an issue and I'm going to try to prepare myself to the best of my ability to to be more flexible and to deal with changes and all that in any way that I can. And if I can't, then it's out of my hands, you know?
yeah.
Well, I was thinking of a friend of mine who got out of medicine completely. He was a PA just because it was getting so difficult to work within the confines of the healthcare system itself. So he got out of it altogether. And I think that's also tragic because of the experience that he had and the experience that you have to get to replace him as someone who's got to go through all that many years till they have that, the expertise that he had. But it was, so I appreciate you still wanting to stay in it and also figure out how to navigate within that so that you're not completely dependent on that kind of ever changing model of how to do business within that.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna let the system stop me from doing the thing I love to do, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
like I didn't want to sort of surrender to that. Like they're not gonna take that away from me. But I want to, like I said, I want to have the freedom to do it in the way I like. If that means I'll do less of it or that's fine, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that you, as they say, think outside the box and also think about what effect is that having on your family and the dynamic of, because I had a husband that traveled extensively through a period of time with my kids, and it has affected, I mean, they're all great kids and doing great, but I've just noticed not having dad around made a difference in, future relationships and dating. And, my daughter's not having a dad around, that plays out later on where they think I don't need men in my life. I can, I can do this myself. And,
It makes a
um,
difference for dad also.
Yeah, absolutely. It works both ways. In fact, one of my boys said, "Is my dad dead?" Because he just was gone so much at the time, and he, as a kid, you can't know that he's going to be
Right.
home in 2 days or three. It's like
Mhm.
it seems like he's never home, and you're not giving me the real story here.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
That's we were like, okay, we need to reevaluate exactly how much time you're on the road and
For
provide
sure.
for the family that way. Um, so real estate, and then where did you get your foot in the door with that? Because everyone has like the first deal they got. You can learn a long time, but then it comes down to
Right.
taking action.
Action. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think I did like a lot of people did. I researched and I read and I got books and I got into bigger pockets.
Mhm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I tried to invest near Baltimore, but I got really into the idea of BRRRR investing with,
Mm-hmm.
buy, rehab, refinance, and then repeat, rent out and repeat, right? And so the problem with that was I didn't have enough money in Baltimore and in most places because, right, the cost to get into these houses is very high, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was not. I looked in a town near where I live in Baltimore, and it's called York, Pennsylvania. It's about an hour north of me.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't. I needed to be there, which I like was a thing that people have, like that I had. Like, oh, I felt weird being like remote investing. I needed to be there. So I found that what was happening is that being close by was actually a liability because I was, first of all, missing deals because if the showing wasn't with my schedule, then I wouldn't be able to get out there. And even when I got out there, I kind of realized quickly that I had no idea what I was looking at. The real estate agent would take me to these houses. I'd be like, that's a water heater. It's heating the water. There's a roof. I don't know if it's a good roof. I don't, like, it looks like there's floor. I don't know. And I didn't know anything I was looking at that. And
Mm-hmm.
also I was like, I never want to live here. I never want to live here. And then I was like, well, but it like turned me off to the place because I was biased towards the type of place I would want to live in. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, well, that's a mistake because I'm not buying something for me to live in, right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So it's like, well, and it wasn't happening. I wasn't finding anything. So I said, forget it. Like I'm not like I'm just gonna say, let's find a market where I can get into a house for less money and it will still generate decent cash flow. And
Mm-hmm.
so I found like I connected in Detroit is where I found because it was really inexpensive.
Yeah.
I like the idea of being a little less like all in to one house. I could be a little more diversified in that way, like more houses. And so I found the houses, and then I built the relationships. I read all the books on like how do you invest out of state, and it's really in this day and age, it's not that much of a challenge, right? You
Yeah.
connect
Yeah.
with real estate agents, you connect with property managers and all that stuff, and then you just have to find good ones and learn how to vet them, which I learned both the good way and the bad way by picking the wrong ones. Ironically, the ones that were the worst ones for me were the ones local, right? So
Yeah.
right, I did a much better job finding a team. I've done much better finding teams out of state than in state, and I don't know, but and
Interesting.
so I got the houses, and then I realized that with the burst strategy, it like takes a while, right? It takes a
Mm-hmm.
long time till you can do this again. And I was like, and you can only do so many, 2, 3 a
Yeah.
year maybe, because by the time you have to get it, you have to rehab it. It has to be rented for a certain amount of time, and then you can refinance it and do it again. But
Yeah.
that could take a while. So then I learned about creative finance. I heard Pace Morby on a podcast, and I was like, okay, that's the answer. And I signed up for the mentorship, and I got into that way because I realized you can acquire houses sort of with less money that were nicer houses in more markets. That was the key for me, is like, how am I going to try to get into a decent market if I don't have $300,000, $200,000 per house, right? Or even 50 or 100, right? Because if you're going to buy a $400,000 house, right, you need $80,000 just for the
Mm-hmm.
down payment if you're going to get right, and then you need to, you got to get a hard money loan, and like it just got like a little bit too much. So I said, well, if you can buy them with creative finance, sub two seller finance, then you have much more flexibility. There's more markets open. There's more houses that are options. And for me, I feel like it's a statistical game, right? The more options you have, the higher your chances of finding something that works.
Yeah.
So I started doing that, and then I started doing using other people's money. So the last 3 deals I've been able to connect with private money lenders and private money partners to keep expanding. And then, that's sort of my plan, like going forward, how can we continue to sort of build that, and make that viable? Because I ran out of my own money like a while ago. Like,
Well,
you need to use other people's investment. You can, it doesn't matter how much money you have eventually, unless you're like a billionaire, you're going to get to a point, or millionaire, like you get to a point where you don't have any more money to invest. Now you have to then partner with people if you want to
yeah,
continue to grow. So that's where I'm
yeah,
at now. I'm just trying to continue to see if I can connect with, not because after whatever 2 years of this, acquiring all these types of houses in all these types of ways with all types of exit strategies, screwing up all kinds of things and being successful in other ways. I have this sort of like whole experience, this, whatever master's degree, I guess, or in life experience,
Yeah.
that I know now what to look for, how to vet, how to analyze deals better, how to deal with problems better. And so now I can take that and say, well, let me partner with somebody who maybe wants to learn all those things, but doesn't want to go through 2 years of intensive training like I did,
exactly.
training by life, right?
Knock. Mm-hmm.
And then, but they'll partner, and they can then connect with me, and I can show them sort of how we do it, go through the process, and then they can learn on the way, and then they can then do it on their own,
Yeah. So, what's your favorite strategy, by the way, so far? I mean, you've
Um,
done
you mean like exit strategy or acquisition strategy?
well, acquisition. I'm guessing everybody love creative. So,
Yeah, I mean,
but,
seller finance is like the coolest. It's just it's neat to like have that kind of relationship with the seller.
mm-hmm,
And it's also nice because that's like the future that I want, right?
mm-hmm,
The
Yeah, I was
ultimate
wondering
future is
if
when
you
you're like,
kind of niche down to what kind of houses you're looking for. So it's those people that are in distress and are going to lose their house,
no, I'm
so that you.
talking about for seller finance is usually not in distress,
yeah, it's the
but
opposite.
the
The
seller
life.
finance is like, that's what I want to be, right? I want to be at a point in the future. I'm like, okay, I'm going to sell my houses now,
Mm-hmm,
and
Oh,
I'm going to sell them on seller finance, and I'll just
mm-hmm,
collect a check every month,
exactly.
right? That's
Mm-hmm.
the goal. At some point in the future, whenever that is. But like, yeah, I have that an Airbnb where I do that. I just send the lady a check every month. She's, I think, in Europe somewhere. I don't even know where she is.
Yeah.
She's just wanted to get out of it, and didn't want to pay a huge amount of capital gains taxes on the
Mm-hmm,
sale. She gets her monthly check, and then I think I have a 6-year balloon, so I can just sell it at some point, or I can refinance it,
mm-hmm.
and that's the goal.
So,
But I'm like, for me, it's more fun to not have a favorite, right?
okay. Yeah, it's
It's
fun to
fun
be
to
different.
Yeah, it's fun to have, like, okay, it's fun to have all of them, so that
Mm-hmm.
when the house comes, you have, the best exit strategy I love to have is more than one, is the
Yes.
multiple exit
Oh,
strategy,
absolutely. You want
right?
to. So,
yeah.
Right. And so I think I do like the co-living exit strategy. I do like midterm rentals exit strategy, because when the prices went up and the rates went up, it
mm-hmm.
generates more income and makes deals happen that wouldn't as a regular long-term rental.
Yeah.
Um, and also, they're nicer houses, so they're usually nicer houses. They're usually a little bit less sort of mechanical maintenance stuff usually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but I don't have a preference, whatever works.
Yeah. 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 That makes sense. You,
So what about uh is it just you, or have you kind of brought some people along that you work together now? Because I'm sure when you started it might have been just you, but as
Yeah.
you kind of learned and expanded, met more people, what does that look like now for you? Do you have other people looking for properties so that you can focus in other areas, kind of thing?
Yeah. Thanks to Jesse Stanton's coaching. So I actually hired an operations manager. And so what she's doing for me is we're building connections with wholesalers that send us deals, and then she's helping with the underwriting, the vetting, and then once we get the acquisition, helping with the getting it running,
Mm-hmm.
because that's time I don't have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then that frees me up to try to build relationships maybe with more investors.
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And then in reality, though, like, each house, I don't have a business partner for myself. I would love that, but I think it's hard because I would hate to, I don't know, maybe being a business partner with somebody who's like full time, I don't know that I can give the same level, but I would love to have a business partner if it worked out. But every house, like you have partnerships, right? Like in some way, the property management company, like I have a property manager for two of the Baltimore houses now, that this is sort of my partner, right? This is
Yeah.
part of the team, even though I don't, I pay her monthly, whatever, but now this is part of the team. And then, anytime you connect with the handyman, the whatever, the
Helps
wholesale, like
them.
it's all one extended team. And I think that the more that, that I can find people to do stuff like that, the happier I am.
No.
Well, I said each new property is kind of like a job interview. You're seeing who is really working out in this, whether it's maintenance, whether it's the property management, and you're figuring out which people you don't ever want to work with again, or
Right.
who you want to continue doing business with, depending on, yeah, just how they do the things you want them to do, whether it's
Each
contract
house
or,
is actually each house is its own business, really, right?
yeah.
Each house has its own bank account. It has sort of employee in this case contracted employees. It's got expenses. It's got income. You're managing it like a business. Each house is its own business,
Yeah.
right? And that's the way I think I look at it. And so it's I listen. I've never run another business. Like the closest thing I had before I was taken over by a big corporate health system. We were a part of a private practice, and we sort of we were rare doctors that fully acknowledged and recognized that we didn't know anything about business, and we hired like
Yeah.
somebody to take care of all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But we used to meet regularly, and he would run through all of the P&L, the contracts, all that stuff. And so it was actually a very good education for me of seeing how that works on a big scale, because this was a big practice. But it's not different than what I'm doing on a small scale with one house,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's December. So what am I spending a lot of my time doing? I'm categorizing expenses,
Exactly.
right? I don't have enough yet that it justifies paying a bookkeeper, but eventually it will. But that's what I'm doing, and that's the same thing that he was doing for the practice. Creating budgets and expenses and stuff like that. Underwriting is just budgeting. That's all it is, right? You're
Right.
just creating a budget for the house
Yeah.
Mhm.
and seeing if the budget works enough that it justifies purchasing the house.
Yeah.
Right.
So are
No.
you doing all single family homes? You talked about an Airbnb that you'd acquired. So what, I have a friend who she did a lot of the seller financing, but then she decided her experience was that oftentimes, well, and this is a case why seller financing is great, but most of the time they didn't end up purchasing the property.
Which
Or
is fine because
yeah, but she would find that one family could really do destruction on on the house in the interim,
true.
and turn to more multifamily unit properties that she was purchasing. So I just wondered
Yeah.
kind of where you are in that
So
process.
I'm doing single family now.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It's funny. I actually went to a meetup, and I had a conversation with Pace Morby, I think 2 weeks ago. And I asked him the question I asked him, which I think if you ever meet with him, you should ask this question,
Mhm.
which is, here's where I am.
Where
What would
would
you do if you were me right now?
yeah,
Right.
Yes.
So
exactly.
what he told me was like where I am now, where I don't have this like giant portfolio, but I have like a decent amount. I
Mhm.
have 9 doors now. He said when you get between 10 and 15, once you're at that point, right,
Yeah.
then you pretty much know everything you need to know about real estate investing, right? He says, I wish I would have gone into then doing more than multifamily at that point, because it's
Mhm.
all the same stuff. It's just you have to spend I
Work.
probably would have to spend a week or two watching a
Mhm.
bunch of videos looking at the differences, but it's essentially the same thing. But you
Mhm.
have, like you said, a little bit of a larger scale. Like instead of finding someone to give you $50,000 as a PML, you need $250,000 to get a down payment. But that's if you build those relationships and it works as the cash on cash return. It may be more difficult to find that person, but you do one of those instead of 10, right?
Yeah.
You
Yes.
know what I mean? So
Yeah. Well,
that's
and I
probably what I want to do eventually, is get to that point where once I feel like I got the point where I got this down and it's stable and it's functioning, and I'm like, okay, I got the system going where I know when I acquire the house it's not going to be a problem. I got the right team, and I'm pretty confident that when the house comes in it's going to work.
Yeah.
right? Which in the beginning I was just like, let's buy, like this. Oh, that's a good deal. That's fun. And now it's like, whoa, okay, well, now we have an eviction problem, and there was the septic system there, and there's this problem and that problem. It's like now when you look at the house, it's more like, okay, what's the team tell me, right?
Yeah.
How confident am I in this property manager that they're giving me the actual numbers that'll work, right? And if so, then is it working? You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. So back to your wife. I was thinking, has she gotten involved at all, or that's Dan's thing that he
She didn't want
does?
anything to do with it.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just was
Yeah,
wondering
my
'cause-
wife is an intense, first of all, a saintly woman and a strong, strong people person. She has
Mm-hmm.
zero interest in anything that is involved in business of any kind, right?
Okay.
okay.
She does mentorship for high school kids, like she does teaching and stuff like that. So like that's her what she does best, and she's much better at being a parent than me, right? And so it's a good, like, we've got a good balance. Like she doesn't want to do any of this stuff, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's great. Like would it be interesting if we did it together? Maybe, I don't know. Some couples it probably works for it. I guess it depends on the relationships, the personalities, and stuff like that.
Well, I was also thinking of, I don't know how old your kids are. How old's your oldest?
My oldest is 19.
Okay, because I wondered how much you were sharing with him of what you were doing. Because in my husband's father was a commercial real estate investor and really retired in his 50s and owned, I think it was a Goodyear tire place, and then owned a mall in Atlanta, and that was enough to create the life that he loved, but he didn't share any of it with his 7 children, his 6 sons and his daughter. And they're all like, I just wish Dad would have sat us down and kind of showed us what he did to have the lifestyle he did when he did. So that's why I was just curious. And it's a lot of why I and Mary too is not only were we wanting to learn more about this industry for ourselves and our future, but also for that our kids and our grandkids to have that passive income. Here's how we did it. Here's how we built it, and including them. So I wonder where you are on any of that.
So yeah, so my kids, they are, it's there for them, right? Meaning I
Mm-hmm.
don't not tell them any, like, they know what I'm doing. If they're interested, then I'm here for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not pushing them into it at this point. My oldest is 19, but my other one's like, I have a 16-year-old daughter, and she's like really into special needs education and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. But my oldest daughter actually just got offered a job where she's going to work for a company that does short-term rental, vacation rental management.
Oh, wow.
So
Mm-hmm.
and she wants to do business. So I think she got a little bit of she got into it, and then it's whatever they want. Like they
Mm-hmm.
could come and be involved. I'll take them with me places and show them how we do things. But they're also kids, like, so they may not always want to sit down and look at a spreadsheet. You know what I mean?
Oh, no.
you know. Well, I'll show them,
Absolutely.
hey, this is the house. Like, look at the pictures. They'll get excited about it, and that's it. And then so eventually, maybe sometime they'll be interested. It's there for them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and also understanding why you got involved in it. Why was that important to you
What's
to
the why?
even think about having that passive income? That to me was
yeah,
the bigger issue. My kids are very creative and entrepreneurial, and I thought, okay, they need to understand just how to create passive income, because that isn't necessarily the focus of education,
Mm.
public
Not at
no, I
education.
all.
definitely had a poor dad. I was from a poor dad family.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
me 100%.
yeah.
Yeah. And so that's why I was just curious where you see your role in just mentorship with your kids. Like, do you take them, on we're going to go look at this house, or.
Yeah, for sure. If they want to, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If they're interested. And yeah, I'm definitely going to help. I think maybe, and then when they get more into like the age of they're thinking about getting married or having a family, that's when it's going to be most in play,
It
so they
does.
could talk about, let's talk about your budget first. Like, I think that's probably more important to teach kids than about passive income, is how do you create and maintain a budget, live within your means or beneath your means, take care of preparing for expenses. That's
Mm-hmm.
probably more important, I think, in my opinion, to teach kids at first.
Sure.
And then once they master that, okay, so now you see your budget, right? And you're like, you want to buy this? Doesn't fit, right?
Yeah.
You want to buy
Yeah.
this, or you got to work more hours, right? And
Uh-huh.
so, because now, okay, well, now that you see what life is, now you can say, okay, well, how do we find a way to make this either easier or more expansive? I think that
Mhm.
that's probably the way to do it. I think, but listen, whatever. I'm not a parenting expert. I'll ask my wife what to do. She'll know.
Yeah. Well, Caroline, your kids and like my girls are much older, and I know that my girls, because my son is just 17 and a half, my girls got interested just now, like in their mid-20s, and oh, mom, I have this money, how can I grow it? And they're really interested. So
Yeah. Yeah,
yes.
I think sometimes if you force things on kids, they will not want to do it. But if you sort of like open as many doors for them as possible, and then when they show a desire and a proclivity, then you
Hmm.
can help them, right? And I think it
Yes.
depends. Like, I don't know, like you guys have enough kids to know that they all are so different. You know what I mean?
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
it's like, can you
Yes.
imagine if you were like a baker and like you made a recipe, you put in the oven, and it came out a cake, and then you did the same recipe, came out like a pot roast? Like,
Yeah.
like you do the same thing and they come out like a totally different creature. Like, how did it even happen? You know what I mean?
I know, that's a good analogy. I never thought of it.
Really good analogy, and it is so
Yeah.
true. From the womb,
Oh
they
my
just have a
gosh.
different. Some are very determined, and others are more laid back, and others really, like you said, do not want to be told what to do, especially from mom. And but at the same time, with like I was saying, with just our ever changing world, that things they just have to learn to be adaptable and
Yeah.
Hmm.
kind of have an awareness. And I like the analogy for me of I was just focused on graduating from getting a degree from a university without really realizing, as a graphic designer, not really realizing that it was transitioning from everything by hand to the computer. So then
Right.
I graduate because my whole goal was I'm just going to graduate, and now I have no skill set that is in being used anymore because I just wasn't aware of the changes of that
Right.
industry. And
Yeah. So
so,
I think that that's something that like, I think maybe it's a generational thing. Like my parents' generation, it was just like go to college, have fun, you'll
Yeah.
figure it out later, which I think is something that you could do for a period in American history where you needed to get a good job, and then you were pretty confident. But I think now, because of how much education costs, and you have, I think people have to be a little more intentional about how they do it. So like my oldest daughter she's doing an online small college. She got credits from community college in high school. She did a
Yeah.
gap year abroad and got credit for that, so that she's going to finish this year, right? She'll be 20 when she graduates with the BA, and she knew she wanted to do business, so she's studying accounting and marketing and all these
Mhm.
things. And so not because she wants to do accounting or marketing, right? But
right.
because is interested in something like this and she's open, and so these are foundational things that she has to have, right? And
No,
so like
absolutely.
my next daughter, she wants to do special education, so it's going to be like, okay, let's focus our the education on that, making sure that you don't go anywhere expensive because of the way they pay teachers. But you know what I mean?
Right. The outcome is the investment in, how much you putting into this, where is it really necessary? Could you get just as good of skill set for that
Absolutely.
use? Yeah, it is very different. Mary's got her son joining the military, and um,
Yes, I'm gonna have one in the IDF and one in the Marines. How
The Marines,
lovely
wow.
it would be. Yeah. I've never, like you're saying, you don't know how they're gonna come out. It's even more if I sat one day and thought, oh, I think Nikki gonna be good at that, or he gonna be good at that. Let me tell you, they're all doing something absolutely opposite that I ever thought they're gonna do.
Right.
And
Yeah, for
here we
sure.
go. So,
Yeah,
but
so I think you're right. I think having the openness to say, okay, what do you want to do, and then I think the real estate thing has taught me very interesting. Okay, so how do you quickly acquire information and
mm-hmm.
then get into something in the right way,
Yeah, and
right?
take
Like I think
action.
that one thing, I think a mistake that I made, I don't know if it's a mistake, I think it's just normal, is that you started getting this real estate thing and then you just want to do everything.
mhm.
And you get into this and you get really into this, and then you get into really something else and something else and something else, and then you never really get focused on one thing,
Tiny
right?
object, it is a very big one in real estate, especially because real estate is such a big umbrella. You want to do you hear something, oh, that sounds cool. Oh, this one sounds cool. And then you're just really not getting anywhere.
I
nowhere.
think it's okay to do that like for a period of time because what you're doing is sort of testing which is the one that you're drawn to, just as long as you recognize that that's what it is, right?
Exactly.
Let's try. Okay, let's
Right.
try multifamily. Okay, that's not working. Let's try this one. Okay, but then at some point you can say, okay, well, this is the one that I'm going to stick to,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
right?
That's
Yeah, that's why I was asking if you kind of homed in on a special, a niche that you particularly found your passion for or success with, that kind of thing. And
Yeah, so I'm
so,
trying to be somebody who buy and hold person, trying to find
Yeah.
a way to acquire and hold on to single family homes. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, that means having multiple different acquisition and disposition strategies is how I do it. Now, fortunately, one thing you learn in medical school is how to sort of take in large amounts of information and filter it and process it. So, kind of getting good. But that's what, one of my strategies when I was acquiring things, let's like get one of everything kind of, you know what I mean? Let's get a
Yeah.
seller finance, let's get a sub two, let's do a short-term rental, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and see in the process, like, how is this working? Right. And learn to do it sort of by doing.
Absolutely.
so if you continue to, are you acquiring properties outside of your state? I know you talked about people in Baltimore, but your
Yeah.
majority of the properties, the real estate that you've been investing in has been outside of
Yeah.
Baltimore.
Yeah. I've never seen most of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in person.
Right. Yeah. Cause yeah.
I mean,
It,
there's a lot to be. I mean, what a great thing that we have. You can use a camera, your phone, and
God bless
Mm-hmm.
America. The only
yeah,
exception, the only house where it made a difference that I needed to be there was the short-term rental, and I was managing it myself. I was doing that for the tax benefits,
Yeah.
but now I have a property manager, so I don't have to deal with it anymore.
Yeah, that's good. That's awesome. So I would ask you one more question before we kind of wrap this up is like for anybody that starts, to listen, that wants to start in real estate, because you've been there and we all three been there in different levels. What would you suggest for somebody if like they have like their eyes like big and then I was like, where am I starting? What am I doing? What would you suggest for somebody that
Um,
starting?
it's a hard question to answer because it depends on where the person is in their life. Do they
Okay.
have money? Do they not have money? Right? Somebody, like most things, it's good to have money in the bank. So if you have money to invest, I think the best thing to do is to be like a private money partner or a
Mm-hmm.
private money lender. And the reason is because if you know nothing about real estate, the process of being a private
Mm-hmm.
money lender and private money partner is you will learn about the process of real estate investing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Doing
because
that.
most of the time, like when somebody, like the person that partnered with me on a house in Denver, she's on all the text messages. She was at the
Mm-hmm.
closing. She was, and we're dealing together with all the management issues. Like she knows everything that's going on. She doesn't have to do any of it. Like we set it up so that she's totally not involved in terms of, she has no responsibility to do anything. I'm taking all the responsibility. She's welcome to do whatever she wants, right? Like she likes to go by there and check it out, and great, like but she doesn't have to. And then she's learning about co-living that way, and now she's now connected with a co-living property manager, and she's connected with a closing company and a real estate agent, and so now she has all those connections if she wants to do it on her own. And I think
Yes.
that's a good way. If you don't have money, I think the best way to do it is, you know, I'm super biased, but like the sub two mentorship, I think is worth every penny if you could find a way to make it happen. The mentorship is not about what you learn; it's about being part of the community. And a lot of people, what they'll do is you can join a team, right? So if you have time but no money, which is, I guess, a lot of young people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you can join one of these teams that does wholesaling, and you can learn about contracts and acquisitions and underwriting, and you get paid a little bit if you close on the deal, but you're really getting the education. How do you underwrite a deal, and how do you do that? And then you're making connections, and then maybe you can start doing that on your own, or you can make a little bit of money and you start saving it up. You do something like house hacking, right? Like that's probably the number one way I think if you want to get into real estate investing, if you're young and you can live anywhere, is to do house hacking, buy a duplex, live in one, rent out the other.
I
You
love
know what I mean?
that.
Like that's like gold. If I didn't have kids, like that's what I would want to do, right? But it's hard to house hack with a family of seven. That
no,
doesn't work.
that's what I've told my kids too. I go buy a house, buy a duplex, just to get that first property under
Absolutely,
your belt
quadplex,
when
whatever
you're
it is. Even if
young.
you have a house with a finished basement, you can
Mhm.
rent out the basement. Like
Yeah.
right now, if I bought a duplex, I put the kids in one side and my wife and I in the other, but that doesn't
Yeah,
work.
They're not
Right?
going to really be
So,
having
so yeah,
that.
I mean, house hacking is like gold, right? Like,
yeah.
listen, I don't think people appreciate, like, I know if you want to really, celebrate the 4th of July, go into depth about how amazing it is that you live in the United States and they have 30-year government backed mortgages that fixed debt is the
Mhm.
greatest thing about being an American is having access to that, because you can get a duplex and you have a 30-year fixed rate, and it's impossible to understate how important it is to have a consistent known like mortgage payment for
Mhm.
30 years, right? So
Yeah,
that you can then confidently know what your income and your profit and loss will be. And now you
absolutely.
can do that, and you can buy a duplex with that. So now you can rent out the other side, and you're getting most of you get, some people will get like free housing because the rent for the one side pays the whole mortgage, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
And then you just
absolutely.
then eventually you can do the slow flip where people live in the apartment, right? And it's maybe not like in perfect shape, and you slowly fix it up over a year, right?
Mhm.
And then you then rent out that part, and then you go buy another one. You can get 10 FHA mortgages like on your
You're
name.
young and do all that
It's
time.
insane, right? And then now you
Mhm.
have something that you can borrow against, and you can then compete expanding. And then all the time, like, a duplex is a great way to learn about property management, because you're learning about all that stuff. If you're in a mentorship, though, like, you have somebody that can answer your questions, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, as they come along. But that's kind of where I was going with that question about it, with your kids as they think about just your 19-year-olds that think about living independently, just because oftentimes it's so far from what they're thinking about. They're busy dating, they're busy just living life without really thinking they have to think about any of those things for the next, 5 years
Yeah,
at least,
yeah,
as
that's
you.
the problem. Like, it's called there's a part of your brain called the prefrontal cortex.
Hmm.
It's a
Yeah.
pop. Yeah, it's the part of your brain that does judgment and like future planning. It's not
Yeah,
developed. You're like, you're like 24, 25. So,
no, trust me.
so like,
I,
everybody's all teenagers are stupid by definition, right? That's why they recruit them to the army, right? Because the two things is stupidity and an overwhelming desire to be part, like, to please a social group, right? Is
yeah.
the perfect
Yeah.
recipe for an army, right? They don't
Yeah.
recruit 27-year-olds to the army. It doesn't work.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, my son joined at 23, and that was like the cutoff for the Navy when he
And
enlisted
that's
in the
because it's hard to get, because he's still stupid enough, right, to want to be in a boat for 6 months with like 300 men or whatever, and like, you know,
Can you
submarine.
imagine
or
that?
a,
Oh,
a submarine. I mean, where it's like 150 kids in a tin can, like whatever, 1,000 meters
Right.
underwater, right?
I know. I asked him what the average age was of the sailors on his submarine, and,
oh,
and
oh,
it's this
submarine.
multi-billion dollar, I don't know,
Like a
trillion dollar.
nuclear submarine, right? Like
Yes,
this.
yes, carrying all the weaponry that can destroy nations. And he goes, about 28.
Yeah,
So
exactly, right.
at
Because
least the
like I'm
frontal
like,
cortex is developed that are running that submarine. But exactly, it is, and I've watched it because I have six sons. It really does take to 25
right,
or
like, you'd
20.
be nervous about like your son driving your car. You know what I mean?
I know. And
Let
then
alone a
they're,
nuclear
and
powered
he's
device that
powering
could
that once he was
start
a
a world war.
nuclear mechanic, yeah, and then all that weaponry that is on
It's
board as well.
scary. It is scary.
It
It
works
It's
really
though.
it
Yeah,
does.
so,
I
but
know.
that's the problem, is that age group, they don't like think that way. So I think that, I don't know, all you can do is just say, listen, I know it doesn't. I know you think I'm clueless and I don't understand anything. Just kind of trust me, right? You don't have to like you don't have to change your whole plans for the future, but just like create a plan B. Let me help you with your
yeah.
plan B, okay? We'll do
Yeah.
plan B. You can have plan A, and then just in case, just humor your old man, right?
That's a good
Well,
idea.
I will say one of my clients talked about, and I think I've told Mary this, and we were having a conversation because Mary and I both work in kind of retirement planning and financial planning through cash value life insurance, which we
Mhm.
also encourage people to use that cash value for future investment opportunities. But he said, I'm having this conversation because my dad's voice just keeps ringing in my
Mhm.
ears. Every Sunday, he'd sit us down and he'd give us a financial lesson. And my brother and I, we hated it. But his voice just keeps ringing in my ears. And that's why I'm having this conversation, he said, with you today, because I just keep hearing my dad. You
Yes.
got to do this. You got to think about these things. So anyway, but you're a great example, both in just serving the people. I had a running partner, and she was a ER nurse, And I thought those are the people that got to think on their feet, be decisive in their plan of action going forward, because you've got these immediate needs of your patients. And
Oh
so,
yeah, ER nurses are a strange breed too. They are a no nonsense. Like they will tell you how it is. They don't suffer fools, and they don't have patience for like nonsense.
Nonsense.
yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, for
yes,
sure.
that was her for sure. But I thought you did not want a nurse that's like, well, I don't know,
No,
maybe we
yeah.
Right,
should.
exactly.
Second
Cool
guessing
nurse,
himself every
right? I was like,
time.
there's
Yeah.
plenty of jobs for
Yeah, for those of you, and my mom was a nurse too, and my dad was he had his own. My stepdad had a pharmacy, and my dad was a pharmacologist. So we had part of that medical thing, and
right.
but I was more the creative type, so that wasn't my path. But this has been
Anyway,
great today. Thank you,
Sure.
Dr. Grove, for joining us, and for your. It's just impressive too that when you made that decision that real estate was something that you wanted to really take interest in and take action with, to allow you that time freedom back
mhm,
down the road, that where you are just 2 years later, I guess, is 2 years
right.
from the time you invested in your first property, or when you made the
Yeah.
decision.
It's actually more like probably like if you add like the whole time, like when did I really start thinking about it? It's
Yeah,
probably like 3 years, 2.5, 3 years. It's been
yeah,
two
but then
years over. It's about 2 years since the first acquisition. Yeah,
Well, that's
yeah, but
awesome.
then going back to just decision making, you're a decision maker. You decided you were going to do that. You took action, and you've learned a wealth of things along the way to get you where you are. And you're still on that learning curve, but also that you didn't leave your full time position as a
Mhm,
doctor, but just looked at ways of just improving your opportunities for the future, which is
mhm.
right.
beautiful. And
Yeah, I think it was Winston Churchill that said that success is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm.
That's
yeah,
a good one.
that is a
As long as you don't lose it in between.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, it is, because oftentimes, I mean, I just know there are times where you just wake up at 3 a.m. and go, okay, now how am I going to solve this solution,
Yeah.
solve this problem that I'm facing with my property, or a certain person relating to that property, or whatever, that it can kind of keep your mind spinning. But one of the beauties is that real estate's all about finding solutions to things.
Hmm.
And definitely is what keeps us going, of just knowing there's problems to solve out there, and why not me?
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dan, for
Pleasure.
coming.
It's great.
Awesome.
Yes, thank
And
you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure, and keep up the good work there
yeah.
with all of your patients that you're serving in that area. And where do we find you?
Yeah.
I know I saw you on YouTube, and I loved your bio kind of that you sent to us. You're all over on
Mhm.
social media,
Yeah.
right?
So I actually never was on social media until the real
Of
estate thing
course.
happened, but
Hmm.
it's sort of like mandatory now, I guess, for anybody. So my YouTube channel is at Dan_Grove_MD. And then
Hmm.
I'm on Facebook, Dan Grove, and I'm on Instagram. And so if you want to really find me, the best thing is I have a website called grovefamilyinvestments.com. Yeah, Grove Family Investments. I feel like I'm like on a radio show. That's
Yeah.
grovefamilyinvestments.com, right? Yeah, grovefamilyinvestments.com. And on that website, I have the links to all the social media sites and all that stuff. So,
Hmm.
but I also have like I try to, when I learn something, I post it. Like I make a blog post so
Hmm.
that somebody else can learn from it too. When I'm dealing with something that's a challenge, I'll just say
Hmm.
like, this is what I'm dealing with. This is what I learned, and you can learn from it too. Because I think it was like Audix that says like the fool learns from their mistakes, the wise man learns from somebody else's, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so the grovefamilyinvestments.com. That's grovefamilyinvestments.com. Right?
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
and
I
yeah,
love that. I love that. My boys were involved in Renatus with me, and we were called the
Yeah.
Blossel Investment Group. Is what we called
right.
ourselves. And then they kind of went off on their separate ways and left mom to kind of move forward with all that kind of stuff as they went forward in other directions.
Right.
But who knows, they may circle back. Those
Yeah.
kids are still in their 20s, and there's time for them to Anyway, it's great. I love what you're doing, the example that you've been, because I have heard also those in the medical community that often they don't learn anything about business. They just learn how to
Yeah.
practice, how to help people get better.
Yeah.
And so that business aspect is really a critical component. And again, I was telling Mary when I found out you were a doctor, I thought, oh, real estate would also be great for all that debt that you incur in the process of being able to go out and
Fortunately, yeah. Fortunately, I'm old enough that medical school was reasonable still when I was there, so my debt is not as catastrophic as it is nowadays.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I can be able to manage the
Well,
debt. Yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
all the more reason that's also something for people just to realize that creating residual income comes in handy in almost anyone's life situation.
Yeah.
So
It's
Yep.
rare that somebody's like, man, I wish I didn't have all this extra income.
Yeah.
right,
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Oh, and the
Look,
kind I don't have to work for, that's the worst kind.
and
The
yeah.
stuff that just comes in all the time, like I don't have to
The
do anything for it.
mailbox
Like,
money.
ugh, what
Mhm.
a pain, right? Who wants that, you
I
know?
gotta cash these checks. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much, and happy holidays to you and your
Yeah,
family. And it was great being with you
Yeah.
for
today.
sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.